I always thought peace had a sound. The slow creak of my wooden bridge, the soft splash of trout in the creek below, and the wind brushing through the pine trees. For 15 years, that little bridge carried nothing heavier than my pickup and a few neighbors' kids on bicycles. Then one morning, I heard a new sound, the deep, grinding roar of a cement truck. And behind the wheel, HOA President Karen herself, waving like she owned the place. By the time I stepped outside, the bridge was trembling, mud swirling in the water and my blood boiling. When I told her she was trespassing, she smirked and said, "Then maybe you should build a stronger bridge, Mike." That's when I knew this wasn't about concrete. It was about control. She thought she could drive over me the same way she drove over my bridge. She was wrong. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because you won't believe how this bridge fight ends. The creek behind my cabin is one of those quiet, stubborn things that ignores calendars. Spring snow melt swells it. August turns it into a ribbon of glass. 15 years ago, when I signed the deed for this parcel, I built my bridge across that stubborn line with Miguel and a rented post pounder. We measured the span between bedrock shelves, bored the pilings through packed gravel, laid the beams, lag-bolted the stringers, and decked it with kiln-dried planks I sealed by hand while a golden retriever named Scout watched. That bridge wasn't just wood and bolts. It was my line in the sand. Now, the next morning, tire grooves still cut across it like scars. I could smell the wet cement she'd spilled on the bank, like a stain on something pure. The HOA had been fighting me for years, trying to annex the land into their little suburban empire. I always said no. That bridge? It was the only way in, the one thing keeping their manicured lawns and cookie-cutter rules on the other side of the creek. I sat on my porch with my coffee going cold, listening to the wood creak under phantom weight. Scout barked at the emptiness, tail stiff. I swear that dog could smell trouble before I did. Around noon, a white SUV pulled up to the opposite bank, Karen again, clipboard in hand, a man in a neon vest behind her. She didn't wave this time. She pointed. The guy nodded, started measuring, scribbling notes. I shouted across the water, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She cupped her hand like a megaphone. "Just verifying property lines. You'll be hearing from the board soon." The board. That's what she called her little kingdom of retirees who thought they were sheriffs of a neighborhood that didn't even include me. That night, I pulled out the old blueprints, my bridge, the land deed, the surveyor's map. Every line was legal. Every nail was mine. Yet something about that day felt different, like she'd already made her move and was waiting for me to react. I walked down to the creek in the moonlight. The air smelled of pine and damp soil. The reflection of the bridge shimmered like a ghost. I knelt down, pressed my hand against one of the beams. Solid. Strong. But the mud at its base was soft, too soft. That's when I noticed it, faint hairline cracks where the cement truck had rolled through. The bridge wasn't just creaking anymore. It was warning me. I straightened up and looked across the water toward the glow of Karen's porch light in the distance. If she wanted a war, she was going to get one. And I wasn't planning to lose. The next morning, fog hung over the creek like breath from something alive. Scout trotted ahead of me as I followed the tire tracks again, deep grooves pressed into the wood, the scars still fresh. I ran my fingers along the splintered edge where one of the planks had started to give. 15 years, that bridge had carried my life across it, groceries, friends, laughter, the sound of Scout's paws. Now it carried proof that someone thought they could crush that all for convenience. Karen didn't just drive a cement truck across my bridge. She drove across everything I'd built here. That's when the idea came, not like lightning, but like a slow fire. The kind that starts small and eats through everything you let it touch. I spent the day walking the property line, tape measure in hand, surveying gear in the other. Karen thought she knew my land. She didn't. Every inch of it, from the ridge to the creek's bend, was my world. I knew every rock, every tree root, every rut from winter floods. By evening, I'd set up my workstation in the shed, old blueprints spread across the table, coffee steaming beside them. I wasn't an engineer anymore, not officially. But once you build something with your own hands, you never forget how it breathes. I marked out stress points under the bridge where the weight from a heavy vehicle would press the hardest. Then I smiled, slow, quiet, deliberate. The way a man smiles when he knows something the enemy doesn't. "Scout," I said softly, scratching his head. "We're gonna fix the bridge, buddy. But not the way she thinks." He wagged his tail once, like he understood. The next day, I went to town. Bought a few things that wouldn't raise eyebrows: rebar, a couple of pressure sensors, some waterproof wiring, and a small batch of expanding foam resin I'd used before in construction work. Legal stuff. Depends on how you use it. I spent 3 nights under that bridge. Headlamp on, hands cold, the sound of the creek whispering like an accomplice. I reinforced the planks, sure, but under them, I installed something special. A custom trap, one that wouldn't hurt anyone, not physically. But it would humiliate them, and it would make sure no one ever forgot who owned that bridge. By the 4th night, I was exhausted, covered in mud, but the setup was complete. The sensors were live. The foam system hidden beneath the center planks was primed. One heavy load, and it would erupt, not with an explosion, but with something far more poetic. A burst of hardened resin that would cement any intruder, literally, in their own mess. Now, all that was left was to wait. And waiting, I learned, is its own kind of battle. Karen showed up 2 days later, right on schedule, her voice echoing before she even came into view. "Mike. You better clear that bridge today, or the HOA will be sending a crew." I didn't answer. I just stood by the porch, coffee in hand, letting her voice carry across the water like a crow's call. Then I saw it, the same cement truck, crawling over the road like a beast returning to its kill. The driver was new, probably hired by the board. Karen followed behind in her SUV, arms crossed, ready to gloat. Scout growled low beside me. The truck eased onto the bridge. The wood groaned, a sound I knew too well. For a second, I almost felt pity. Almost. Then came the hiss, faint, sharp, like the bridge was exhaling. And before anyone realized what was happening, the middle section burst upward in a geyser of white foam. The truck froze in place, wheels locked, resin climbing like roots around its tires. The driver jumped out screaming, his boots sinking into sticky cement sludge that hardened almost instantly. Karen's jaw dropped. She stood there, speechless, as the creek below mirrored the chaos above. I sipped my coffee and finally called out, calm and clear. "Guess it's a stronger bridge now, huh, Karen?" Scout barked once, proud as hell. By sunrise, the whole valley knew. The bridge, my bridge, stood like a frozen battlefield. The cement truck still anchored in the middle, resin hardened around its wheels like roots from the earth itself. The driver was fine, though his pride wasn't. Karen had called the sheriff, the HOA board, even a tow company that refused to cross once they saw the mess. From my porch, I watched it all unfold like theater. Sheriff Lane arrived first, tall, quiet man, the kind who speaks more with eyebrows than words. He'd known me for years. "Morning, Mike," he said, squinting across the water. "Heard you had a bit of an incident." "Guess the bridge couldn't handle all that weight," I said, sipping my coffee. "You know how delicate old wood can be." Lane smirked, looked at the cement truck lodged in the resin. "That so? Funny how it looks like some kinda trap." "Coincidence," I said flatly. Karen stormed over before he could reply. "This man sabotaged the bridge. That's vandalism, endangerment, probably terrorism. He could have killed someone." Lane raised a brow. "And why was a cement truck crossing private property in the first place, Karen?" That shut her up for a heartbeat, but only a heartbeat. This land will be part of the HOA soon, she hissed. We already filed for annexation. He can't keep this area locked off forever. I almost laughed. The woman had guts, I'll give her that. Standing knee-deep in her own crime scene, still thinking she owned the place. Lane sighed. Karen, until that paperwork clears, this property's still his. Maybe best to head home before I start writing tickets for trespass. Her eyes darted between him and me, fury barely contained. This isn't over, she said, her voice trembling with rage. No, I said quietly. It isn't. She drove off, tires spitting gravel. The sheriff lingered for a while, taking notes, snapping pictures. He knew better than to ask more questions. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, if she keeps pushing, document everything. Folks like her don't know when to quit. He was right. That evening, I found a letter taped to my mailbox, cease and desist. The HOA demanded immediate removal of the hazardous obstruction and reconstruction of the shared access bridge. Shared access, my ass. But what got me wasn't the letter. It was the small, folded note underneath. No signature, just 6 words written in neat handwriting. You don't know what you started. Scout barked at the empty road for hours that night. The next morning, I noticed the signs, small things. My motion lights tripped at 3 a.m. footprints near the creek. The feeling of being watched. Karen wasn't done, she was escalating. So I escalated too. I installed trail cameras across the tree line, motion sensors by the bridge, and an old CB radio in case my phone mysteriously stopped working, which it did, 2 days later. That's when I saw them. 2 men in reflective vests, pretending to inspect the bridge. But their truck had no company logo. I watched from behind the shed, heart steady. They measured, took pictures, one even scraped off some resin for testing. They weren't HOA contractors. They were lawyers in disguise. Karen was building a case. That night, I took the long walk down to the bridge. Moonlight glittered on the frozen resin like glass. Scout followed silently, his tail low. I sat on the railing, listening to the creek whisper under the weight of everything I'd done. I didn't regret it. Not one bit. But I knew something else now. Karen wasn't just fighting for control. She was fighting for humiliation, to make me the villain in her story. She wanted a war. Then I'd give her one. Only this time, I wouldn't just set a trap for her wheels. I'd set one for her ego. The next week, the air itself felt different, tense, expectant. Like the forest was holding its breath. The bridge stood quiet, half sealed in hardened resin, half waiting for the next chapter. Karen had gone quiet too. That's what bothered me most. I've learned that silence from a woman like her isn't peace, it's plotting. The HOA's newsletters stopped mentioning me, their usual threats vanished, and even the board's SUV stopped cruising past my mailbox. But I wasn't fooled. People like Karen never surrender, they just sharpen their next move. And that's when I decided to stop waiting for her to attack. If she wanted to play chess, I'd make sure the next move ended the game. I started with information. A man named Russell, who used to do yard work for the HOA, stopped by one evening for a beer. He talked too much when he drank, which was perfect. Karen's been bragging, he said between gulps. Told the board she's got proof you rigged the bridge. Said she hired some specialist to prove you endangered public safety. Did she say who? I asked. He nodded. Some inspector from the county. Coming by this weekend. I smiled slowly. Good to know. That night, I stayed up sketching out plans on my kitchen table, not of traps this time, but of perception. Because revenge doesn't always come with fire or explosions. Sometimes, it comes wrapped in truth, exposed at the right moment. I gathered everything I had, the deed, the photos of Karen trespassing, the video from my trail cams of her cement truck crossing the bridge before it collapsed. I even printed out her messages from the public HOA board where she'd written that she had the right to use the land. The next morning, I made one more trip, to an old friend, Ethan, who worked at the local county office. "Need a favor," I said, sliding the files across his desk. "I just want to make sure the inspector gets the full story. No surprises." Ethan frowned. "Mike, this is turning into a war." "It already is," I said quietly. "I'm just choosing the battlefield." Saturday came like a storm pretending to be a breeze. Karen arrived first, wearing that smug grin she saved for moments she thought were victories. Behind her, a man in a hard hat and clipboard stepped out of a county vehicle. "Morning, Mike," she said sweetly. "Hope you don't mind, we're just conducting a safety review. You know, for the community." I nodded, calm as stone. "Of course. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt." As the inspector walked toward the bridge, I handed him a neatly labeled folder. "Before you step on it, you might want to see this: timestamps, videos, and permits. You'll find the HOA's vehicle records interesting too." Karen's smile faltered. "What is this?" "Just context," I said, sipping my coffee. 10 minutes later, the inspector came back pale and quiet. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, it looks like you authorized that cement truck to cross. This isn't his liability, it's yours." Karen's face drained of color. That's impossible. He must have." But the inspector wasn't listening. He'd already started writing his report. "Ma'am, I'll need to file this as a misuse of private infrastructure. Possibly falsified claims." I swear the sound of her composure cracking was louder than the creak itself. She turned toward me, voice shaking with fury. "You think this is over?" "No," I said softly. "But you're not the one writing the next chapter." She stormed off, heels snapping like gunfire against the gravel. That night, I sat by the bridge under a full moon. The air smelled clean again: pine, water, earth. Scout lay beside me, finally relaxed. It wasn't victory yet. But it was the moment before one, the calm before the real trap closed. Because the best revenge doesn't come when they see it. It comes when they realize they built it themselves. It rained that night. Not a soft drizzle, but one of those angry mountain rains that strips leaves off trees and turns gravel roads into rivers. Thunder rolled through the valley, shaking the windows of my cabin. Scout barked once, then hid under the table. I didn't blame him. Something about that storm felt like the end of a story that had been building for too long. By morning, the air was thick with fog. The bridge looked different, darker, heavier, the creek swollen beneath it. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, when I saw headlights cut through the mist. Karen's SUV. Even after the inspection, after her lies were exposed and her case dismantled, she still came back. Maybe pride brought her. Maybe rage. Maybe both. She pulled up to the bank, engine idling, window down. Her hair was soaked, makeup streaked, but that familiar fire burned in her eyes. "You think you've won, don't you?" she shouted over the rain. "You humiliated me in front of the board. The county suspended me, and now everyone in the neighborhood's laughing." I didn't answer. "You destroyed everything," she screamed. "My reputation." "Karen," I interrupted quietly, "you did that yourself." She slammed the car door open, heels sinking in the mud. "You're a monster, Mike. You trapped me, manipulated everything, made me look like." "Like what?" I asked. "Like someone who tried to steal what wasn't hers." She stood there, trembling, and for the first time since this began, she didn't look powerful. She looked small, like a queen whose crown had slipped too far to fix. Her voice cracked. "You don't understand what it's like. Keeping everything perfect, keeping everyone in line. Control's not the same as peace, I said. You never built anything, Karen. You just took. The rain poured harder, sheets of it dancing across the water. And then she did it, the thing I didn't think she'd dare. She climbed back into her SUV, revved the engine, and aimed it straight at the bridge. Karen! I shouted. Don't you? But she hit the gas. The tires spun, mud spraying, headlights flaring through the fog as the SUV lunged forward onto the wood. The bridge groaned, flexed, and for a heartbeat, it held. Then came the sound I'll never forget. A deep, splitting crack, like thunder underfoot. The middle section buckled, the swollen creek ripping at the supports, and in a flash of white spray and twisted metal, the SUV vanished. I ran to the edge, heart pounding. The current roared below, carrying pieces of shattered wood and silver metal downstream. For a moment, I thought I saw her face in the window, wide-eyed, desperate, then gone. Silence followed. Only the sound of the rain and the creek reclaiming what was always its own. By the time the sheriff arrived, the storm had passed. They found the car wedged against a fallen log downstream. Karen was alive, bruised, shaken, silent. She didn't look at me when they pulled her out. Didn't speak, either. Lane looked at me across the wreckage. You set another trap, Mike. I shook my head. No. That one wasn't mine. He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe not. But I guess the creek has a way of keeping score. Weeks passed. The HOA dropped its claim to my land. Karen moved away, no announcement, no farewell. Her perfect lawns and porcelain smile became rumors whispered across fences. I rebuilt the bridge, properly this time, with new beams and reinforced supports. But I left one plank from the old one in place, warped and scarred, just to remember. Some nights, when the wind moves right, I still hear that creak, the same one from before all this began. Peace, I realized, doesn't mean silence. It means knowing you've drawn your line, and that it held. Scout lies beside me, older now, sleeping with his head on my boot. The creek runs steady, stubborn as ever. And somewhere out there, I hope Karen finally learned. You can drive across a bridge. But you can't drive across a man who built it with his own hands.